The bullet tore through the fabric of Cara Langford's only dress as she dove behind the overturned wagon, missing her shoulder by mere inches. And in that moment, she realized the men who had murdered her father 3 days prior had finally caught up with her in the Colorado wilderness. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she pressed herself against the splintered wood, her fingers digging into the mountain soil beneath her. The year was 1876, and these rocky hills outside of Breckenridge had become both her refuge and her prison. She had been running for what felt like forever, surviving on creek water and whatever roots she could identify from the sparse knowledge her father had shared during their westward journey. Now, with 3 armed men closing in on her position, she wondered if this was where her story would end. "Come on out, girl," a gravelly voice called from somewhere beyond the rocks. "We just want to talk about what your daddy knew. Make this easy on yourself." Cara squeezed her eyes shut, her mind racing. Her father had been a surveyor, hired by the mining company to map the mountain territories. He had discovered something that had gotten him killed in their camp 3 nights ago. She had only survived because she had been gathering firewood when the shots rang out. By the time she returned, her father lay dead, and these men were rifling through his papers. She had grabbed what she could and run into the darkness, and she had been running ever since. A branch snapped to her left. They were flanking her. She had no weapon, no horse, and no idea where she was anymore. The mountains stretched endlessly in every direction, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the summer warmth in the valleys below. She had been climbing steadily upward, hoping to lose her pursuers in the elevation, but they had proven more persistent than she had anticipated. "Last chance, miss," another voice shouted, this one younger, eager. "We ain't got all day." Cara looked around desperately. Behind her, the terrain grew steeper, more treacherous. Massive pine trees clung to the rocky slopes, their roots somehow finding purchase in the unforgiving stone. If she could make it to that tree line, perhaps she could disappear into the forest. It was a slim chance, but it was the only one she had. She gathered herself, preparing to run, when a sound unlike anything she had ever heard echoed through the valley. It was part battle cry, part animal roar, and it froze everyone in place. The gunmen stopped advancing, their voices going silent as they tried to locate the source of the sound. Then he appeared. He came down from the higher slopes like an avalanche given human form, his massive frame covering ground with impossible speed. His hair, dark as a raven's wing, hung past his shoulders and whipped behind him as he moved. His buckskin clothing stretched tight across muscles that seemed carved from the very mountains themselves. In his hands, he carried a rifle that looked almost small against his considerable size. The first gunman barely had time to turn before the mountain man was upon him. The rifle butt connected with the man's jaw with a sickening crack, dropping him instantly. The second gunman managed to raise his weapon, but a thrown knife embedded itself in his shoulder before he could pull the trigger, and he went down screaming. The third man, the one with the gravelly voice, proved more experienced. He fired 2 quick shots at the charging figure, but the mountain man had already moved, using the terrain itself as cover. He rolled behind a boulder, came up with his own rifle, and fired a single shot that sent the third man's gun flying from his hands. "Leave," the mountain man said, his voice like grinding stones. It was not a request. The gravelly-voiced man clutched his hand where the bullet had grazed it, looked at his 2 companions, one unconscious and one writhing in pain, and made the smart choice. He grabbed the younger one, hauled him to his feet, and together they dragged their unconscious companion back down the trail, leaving a line of disturbed dust in their wake. Cara remained frozen behind the wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had gone from 3 threats to 1, but this new threat was far more imposing than anything she had faced before. The man stood at least 6.5 feet tall, his broad shoulders blocking out the sun as he turned toward her hiding spot. "You can come out now," he said, his voice gentler this time but still carrying that rumbling quality. "They are gone." She stood slowly, her legs shaking beneath her. As she rose to her full height, which barely reached his chest, she got her first clear look at her rescuer. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with a strong jaw covered in dark stubble. His eyes, though, surprised her. They were a striking blue, the color of the mountain sky, and they held an intelligence and awareness that contradicted his wild appearance. "Thank you," she managed, her voice hoarse from days of little water and constant fear. "They killed my father. They have been hunting me." The mountain man studied her for a long moment, taking in her torn dress, her scratched arms and face, the way she swayed slightly on her feet from exhaustion and hunger. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You need food and water," he said. It was a statement, not a question. "My camp is not far. You will be safe there." "I do not know you," Cara said, trying to muster some defiance despite her desperate situation. "Why should I trust you?" "Because if I meant you harm, you would already be harmed," he replied simply. "And because you will not survive another night out here alone. Those men will return with more. This I know." She hated that he was right. She hated feeling so helpless, so dependent on the mercy of strangers. But her father had raised her to be practical above all else, and practically speaking, she had no other options. "What is your name?" she asked. "Beckett Stone," he answered. "And yours?" "Cara Langford." "Come, Cara Langford. We have perhaps 2 hours of good light left, and the mountain does not forgive those who walk her at night." He turned and began walking up the slope without looking back to see if she followed. After a moment's hesitation, Cara did. What other choice did she have? The climb was brutal. Her city shoes, already falling apart from days of rough travel, provided almost no grip on the rocky terrain. Several times she stumbled, and each time Beckett was there, his large hand steadying her with surprising gentleness before he continued upward. He moved through the wilderness as if he were part of it, his feet finding purchase on surfaces that looked impossible to traverse. They crossed a narrow ridge where the wind howled around them with enough force to steal Cara's breath. On either side, the mountains dropped away into valleys so deep she could not see their bottoms. She kept her eyes forward, focused on Beckett's broad back, and tried not to think about how far she would fall if she missed a step. Finally, as the sun began to paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, they reached his camp. It was tucked into a natural hollow in the mountainside, sheltered on 3 sides by towering rock walls. A small cabin, built from logs so tightly fitted they needed no chinking, sat against the back wall. A fire pit, cold now, occupied the center of a flat area in front of the cabin. A lean-to held stacks of firewood and what looked like hunting and trapping supplies. But what captured Cara's attention, what made her stop in her tracks and stare, was the view. From this vantage point, she could see for what must have been 100 miles. Mountains rolled away in every direction, their peaks painted purple and blue by the fading light. Valleys of green spread between them, and in the distance she could see the glint of water, perhaps a river or a large stream. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," Beckett agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was not looking at the view. He was looking at her. The moment their eyes met, he turned away quickly. "You should sit. I will bring water and food." The cabin's interior was sparse but clean. A large bed filled one corner, covered with fur pelts that looked warm and comfortable. A table and 2 chairs occupied another corner, and shelves lined the walls, holding supplies, tools, and various items she could not immediately identify in the dim light. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its chimney rising through the roof. Beckett lit a lamp, and warm light flooded the space. He gestured to one of the chairs, and Cara sank into it gratefully, every muscle in her body screaming with exhaustion. He brought her a cup of water from a barrel by the door, and she drank it so quickly she had to stop and cough. "Slowly," he advised, bringing her more. "Your body is not prepared for abundance after days of want." He moved to the shelves and began gathering items. Soon he had a fire going in the fireplace and a pot of something bubbling over it. The smell that began to fill the cabin made Cara's stomach clench with hunger so intense it was almost painful. "Rabbit stew," Beckett explained, stirring the pot. "And some roots. It will help restore your strength." While the stew cooked, he brought out a basin of water and a cloth. "You have cuts that need cleaning. The mountain can turn the smallest wound into a serious problem." Cara looked down at her arms and was almost surprised to see the numerous scratches and scrapes covering her skin. She had been so focused on running, on surviving, that she had barely noticed the injuries accumulating. Beckett pulled the other chair close and took her hand with surprising gentleness. His hands, she noticed, were massive, scarred, and calloused from hard living, yet they moved with precision as he cleaned each wound. The cloth stung against her raw skin, but she bit her lip and remained silent. "You can cry out if it hurts," he said quietly, not looking up from his work. "There is no shame in acknowledging pain." "I have cried enough these past days," Cara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I watched my father die. I watched them shoot him while I hid like a coward in the darkness. I think I am finished with tears." Beckett paused in his ministrations and looked up at her. His blue eyes held something she had not expected, understanding. "Survival is not cowardice," he said firmly. "If you had revealed yourself, you would be dead also. Your father would not have wanted that. No good father would." "How would you know what a good father wants?" The words came out sharper than she intended, fueled by grief and exhaustion. "Because I had one," Beckett replied simply. "He taught me these mountains, taught me to live in them. He died 5 winters ago, taken by a fever I could not cure. I think of him every day, and I know he is glad I survived, even though I could not save him." The simple honesty of his words struck something deep in Cara's chest, and she felt the tears she had claimed to be finished with burning in her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. Beckett returned to cleaning her wounds without comment. When he finished with her arms, he hesitated, then gestured to her face. "You have cuts here also." She nodded, and he moved closer, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his large frame. The cloth touched her cheek with feather-light pressure, as he carefully cleaned a long scratch that ran from her temple to her jaw. This close, she could see the details of his face. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the crinkles at the corners of his eyes from squinting into the sun, the fullness of his lower lip. She had never been this close to a man before, save her father. It made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "There," Beckett said, pulling back and standing abruptly, as if he too had felt something uncomfortable in their proximity. "The stew should be ready." He filled 2 bowls and brought them to the table. Cara forced herself to eat slowly, though every instinct screamed at her to devour the food as quickly as possible. It was the best thing she had ever tasted, rich, hearty, warming her from the inside out. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the gentle howl of wind outside the cabin. Finally, Cara set down her spoon and looked at her host. "Why do you live up here, so far from everything?" Beckett considered the question while he chewed, his jaw working methodically. The mountains do not lie. They do not cheat, steal, or kill for greed. They are dangerous, yes, but honestly so. I prefer their company to that of most men. That sounds lonely. It can be, he admitted. But it is also peaceful. In town, I was expected to be things I am not, to live ways that did not suit me. Here I am simply myself. What town? Breckenridge, mostly. Sometimes I go down to trade furs and meat for supplies I cannot make or grow myself, but I do not stay long. Cara absorbed this information. That is where I was heading when those men found me. My father and I were based there for his surveying work. What did he discover that was worth killing for? She hesitated, unsure how much to trust this man who had saved her life but whom she had known for only a few hours. Then again, he had already demonstrated more kindness than she had any right to expect, and she desperately needed to tell someone. Gold, she said quietly. A new vein, larger than anything found in the area before. He was planning to file a claim to secure the rights for himself rather than the mining company who employed him. Somehow they found out. I think someone in their office saw his papers, saw what he had marked. Beckett's expression darkened. Men have killed for far less than gold in these mountains. You have his papers, his maps, Cara nodded slowly. I grabbed what I could when I ran. They are in my dress pocket. She reached into the hidden pocket she had sewn into the lining and pulled out several folded, dirt-stained papers. Beckett did not reach for them. Those papers could buy you a future. They could also buy you a grave. I know. What do you want to do? The question surprised her. Since her father's death, she had been so focused on simple survival that she had not thought beyond the next hour, the next day. What did she want? I want justice for my father, she said slowly. I want the men who killed him to face consequences, but I also want to live. I want a life, though I have no idea what that looks like now. Beckett nodded slowly. These are reasonable wants. They will not be easy to achieve, but they are possible. Will you help me? He met her gaze directly. Yes. Why? You do not know me. These papers, this gold, it is not your concern. You are in my camp, eating my food under my protection. That makes it my concern. And he paused, seeming to wrestle with something internally. I do not like men who kill for greed. I do not like men who hunt women through the wilderness. It offends something in me. So yes, Cara Langford, I will help you. The simple certainty in his voice made her believe him. For the first time in days, some of the crushing weight on her chest eased slightly. You need rest, Beckett continued, standing and moving toward the door. Take the bed. I will sleep outside. Keep watch in case your friends return. I cannot take your bed, Cara protested. You have already done too much. The bed or the floor, those are your choices. But you will sleep inside where it is warm and safe. This is not negotiable. His tone brooked no argument. Cara was too tired to fight anyway. The moment she lay down on the soft furs, her body seemed to simply shut down, pulling her into sleep so quickly she did not even hear Beckett leave the cabin. She woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window and the smell of cooking meat. For a moment, she could not remember where she was and panic seized her. Then memory returned. The chase, Beckett, safety. She sat up slowly, her body aching but feeling stronger than it had in days. Through the window, she could see Beckett tending a fire outside, turning strips of meat on a makeshift grill. His hair was tied back now, revealing the strong lines of his face more clearly. Even in the simple act of cooking, his movements held a fluid grace that seemed impossible for someone so large. Cara stood and moved to the basin of water, splashing her face and doing what she could to make herself presentable. Her dress was a disaster, torn and stained beyond any hope of proper repair. She had no other clothes, nothing but what she wore when she stepped outside. Beckett glanced up and gestured to a log by the fire. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in a long time," she admitted, sitting down. "Thank you." He handed her a tin plate with venison and what looked like fried roots. "Eat, we have much to discuss." Cara ate while Beckett laid out his thinking. "Those men will return, probably with more. They know generally where you were heading, which means they know you are in these mountains. We have a few days, perhaps, before they gather enough men to search properly." "What can we do in a few days?" "Several things. First, we need to get you proper clothing and equipment. You cannot survive up here in that dress. Second, we need to understand exactly what your father found and where. Third, we need to decide how to proceed, whether to go to the authorities or handle this another way." "The authorities might be compromised," Cara said. "The mining company has significant influence in Breckenridge." "I thought the same, which means we need to be clever." Over the next hour, they examined her father's papers together. The maps showed a location about 2 days' ride from Beckett's camp, in a narrow canyon that wound deep into the mountains. Her father's notes described a gold vein exposed by a recent rock slide, the ore so rich it practically glittered in the stone. "I know this place," Beckett said, studying the map. "It is difficult to reach, treacherous, but if what your father describes is accurate, it would be worth a fortune." "Then we should go there," Cara said. "See it for ourselves, understand what we are dealing with." Beckett looked at her with something like approval. "That is wise, but first, we address your clothing situation. Come." He led her to the lean-to and began pulling out various items. There were several buckskin shirts, all far too large for her, and several pairs of trousers in similar condition. He also produced a large fur pelt and some leather cord. "These were mine when I was younger, before I reached my full size," he explained, holding up one of the smaller shirts. "They will still be large on you, but less so, and we can tie them to fit better." Cara took the clothing, feeling the soft leather between her fingers. It was beautifully made, every seam tight and even. "Did you make these?" "My mother did," Beckett said quietly. "She was skilled with leather and fur. She died when I was 15, but I kept her work." "I am sorry. I could not possibly wear something so precious to you." "She would want them used, not sitting in storage. And you need them. Practical need outweighs sentiment." He showed her how to tie the trousers so they would not fall, how to belt the shirt to make it manageable. When she emerged from the cabin in the ill-fitting buckskins, she felt strange, almost like a different person. But she also felt freer, able to move without the restrictive weight of skirts. "Better," Beckett pronounced. "Now for boots." The boots proved more challenging. Beckett's feet were enormous, and even his oldest boots swallowed Cara's feet entirely. In the end, he fashioned makeshift moccasins from soft leather, wrapping them tightly around her feet and ankles. "They will do until we can get you proper boots," he said. "Or until I have time to make you better ones." The casual assumption that she would be staying, that he would have time to make her boots, sent a flutter through Cara's stomach that she tried to ignore. Over the next 3 days, Beckett prepared for their journey to the canyon. He checked his weapons, repaired his pack, and spent hours teaching Cara basic survival skills. He showed her which plants were safe to eat, how to find water even when no stream was visible, how to read the signs of changing weather in the mountain sky. He also showed her how to shoot. The rifle was heavy in her hands, but Beckett positioned himself behind her, his arms around her as he adjusted her grip, showing her how to sight down the barrel. His body was warm and solid against her back, and Cara found it hard to concentrate on his instructions. "Breathe out slowly as you squeeze the trigger," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Do not pull, squeeze." She followed his guidance, and the rifle kicked against her shoulder with surprising force. The tin he had set up as a target went spinning. "Good," Beckett said, stepping back. "Again." By the end of the third day, Cara could hit the target more often than not. She would never be a great shot, but she was competent enough to defend herself if necessary. The knowledge gave her a confidence she had not felt since her father's death. During those days, she learned more about Beckett. He was 26 years old, 10 years her senior, but not impossibly so. He had been living in these mountains for 5 years, ever since his father's death. Before that, he had worked various jobs in Breckenridge, none of which suited him. "I am not good with people," he admitted one evening as they sat by the fire. "I am too blunt, too direct. I do not understand the games people play, the way they say one thing and mean another. It frustrated me constantly. My father understood. He was the same way. The mountains make sense to us in ways that towns never did." "I think your directness is refreshing," Cara said. "You say what you mean. There is honor in that." Beckett looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You are easy to talk to. That is unusual for me." "You are easy to talk to as well. You listen. Really listen. That is rarer than you might think." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection forming that went beyond simple gratitude or companionship. Cara felt it in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. On the fourth morning, they set out for the canyon. Beckett had 2 horses, both sturdy mountain breeds built for navigating difficult terrain. Cara had ridden a few times in her life, but never on ground like this. The trails, if they could be called that, wound along cliff edges and through boulder fields, crossed rushing streams and climbed slopes so steep she had to lean forward over her horse's neck. Beckett rode ahead, leading them with the confidence of someone who knew every stone and tree in these mountains. Several times he would stop, study the ground or the vegetation, and adjust their course slightly. When Cara asked what he was looking for, he explained he was reading the signs of animal movement, weather patterns, and human passage. "3 riders came through here yesterday," he said at one point, gesturing to disturbed earth that looked no different from any other ground to Cara's untrained eyes. "Moving fast, heading deeper into the mountains. Could be your hunters, could be someone else. We will be cautious." They camped that night in a small grove of aspen trees, their white trunks glowing ghostly in the moonlight. Beckett built a small fire, just large enough to cook their meal but not so large it would be visible from a distance. As Cara ate, she watched him move around the camp, checking their horses, ensuring their supplies were secure, always alert, always aware. "You ever relax?" she asked. He paused, considering the question. "In my cabin sometimes. Out here, relaxation can get you killed." "That sounds exhausting. It is simply how one lives in the wilderness. You would adapt to it given time." "Would I?" He looked at her directly, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "Yes, you are stronger than you think, Cara Langford. Most people from town would have died in their first day alone on this mountain. You lasted 3 and were still fighting when I found you. That speaks to considerable strength." The compliment warmed her more than it probably should have. "I just did what I had to do to survive." That is what strength is. Not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. That night, she slept beside the fire while Beckett kept watch. She woke once in the deep hours of the night to find him sitting on a fallen log, his rifle across his knees, his gaze scanning the darkness beyond their camp. The moonlight painted him in silver and shadow, making him look almost mythic, like some ancient guardian carved from the mountains themselves. She must have made a sound because he turned toward her. "Sleep," he said softly. "I am watching." And somehow, despite being in the wilderness pursued by killers, she felt safe enough to do exactly that. They reached the canyon late the next afternoon. It was exactly as her father had described, a narrow cleft in the rock face, easy to miss if you did not know what to look for. They left the horses in a protected spot and proceeded on foot, with Beckett leading the way. The canyon walls rose sheer on either side, so close in places they could touch both walls simultaneously. The floor was littered with rubble from various rockslides, making the footing treacherous. They moved slowly, carefully, deeper into the mountain. Then Beckett stopped so abruptly that Cara nearly ran into his back. He held up a hand for silence, then pointed ahead. There, in a shaft of afternoon sunlight that somehow reached the canyon floor, the rock face glittered as if studded with stars. Gold. More gold than Cara had ever imagined. The vein ran through the exposed rock like a ribbon of sunlight frozen in stone. Her father had not exaggerated. This was a fortune beyond measure. Now we know what you are dealing with, Beckett said quietly. Now we understand why they are willing to kill. What do we do? Before he could answer, a voice echoed down the canyon. That is an excellent question. They spun to find 5 men blocking the canyon entrance behind them. The gravelly-voiced man stood in the center, his hand bandaged but holding a pistol steady. 2 of his original companions flanked him, along with 2 others Cara did not recognize. I knew if we watched the approaches long enough you would come here eventually, the man said, his scarred face splitting into an ugly grin. Took longer than I expected, but patience pays off. Now, miss, hand over those papers and we will make this quick. You have my word. The word of a murderer means nothing, Cara said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. The man shrugged. Fair enough. Then how about this? Give me the papers, or I kill your mountain man friend here and then you anyway. Cara's hand moved toward her pocket, but Beckett caught her wrist. No. They will kill us anyway, she whispered. Perhaps, but not easily. The man laughed. There are 5 of us and 2 of you, and you are trapped in a dead-end canyon. Do not be a fool, mountain man. You fought well before, but there is no getting out of this. There is always a way out, Beckett replied. His voice had changed, gone flat and cold in a way that made Cara shiver. You just have to be willing to pay the price. Then several things happened at once. Beckett grabbed Cara and dove sideways into a narrow crevice in the canyon wall that she had not even noticed was there. Shots rang out, bullets sparking off stone where they had just been standing. Beckett returned fire from the crevice and one of the men went down screaming. Can you climb? Beckett asked urgently, pointing up into the crevice. In the dim light, Cara could see that it formed a narrow chimney rising up between the canyon walls. I do not know. You will have to try. Go now, I will cover you. More shots echoed in the confined space, deafeningly loud. Cara began to climb, wedging herself between the rock faces and pushing upward with her legs the way Beckett quickly showed her. Her muscles burned, her fingers scraped raw on the stone, but fear drove her upward. Below, she could hear Beckett firing, the men shouting, the chaos of combat. Then she heard something that made her blood run cold, the distinctive click of an empty chamber. He is out, someone yelled. Rush him, keep climbing, Beckett roared up at her. Then she heard grunts, the sound of impacts, men cursing. He had been forced into hand-to-hand combat. Cara climbed faster, her arms screaming in protest. She had to get to the top, had to find help, had to do something. She could not let Beckett die defending her. The crevice opened onto a narrow ledge about 30 feet above the canyon floor. Cara pulled herself up and looked down to see Beckett surrounded by the 4 remaining men. Even as she watched, his fist connected with one man's jaw, dropping him instantly. But another man clubbed him from behind with a rifle butt, and Beckett staggered. Cara's hand went to the pistol Beckett had insisted she carry. She had never shot a person before. The thought made her stomach churn. But watching the men close in on Beckett, seeing him fight 4 against 1, made her decision for her. She drew the pistol, aimed as carefully as her shaking hands would allow, and fired at the man raising his rifle to shoot Beckett in the back. The recoil surprised her, throwing her aim off, but the bullet still caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The distraction gave Beckett the opening he needed. He grabbed the nearest man and threw him bodily into another, then retrieved a knife from his belt and faced the remaining 2 with renewed determination. "Cara, run," he shouted up at her. "Follow the ledge east, back toward the horses." "I am not leaving you. Damn it, woman, for once just do what I tell you." One of the men below made a decision and started climbing up after Cara. Below, Beckett was locked in a desperate struggle with the gravelly-voiced leader, both men wielding knives now, circling each other in the narrow canyon. Cara did not run. Instead, she moved along the ledge to a position above the man climbing toward her and began kicking loose rocks down at him. Small ones at first, then larger. One struck his head and he lost his grip, falling 15 feet back to the canyon floor and landing with a sickening crack. The gravelly-voiced man glanced up at his fallen companion, and Beckett used the moment of distraction to strike. His knife found its target and the man went down hard. Beckett stood over him for a moment, breathing hard, then looked up at Cara. "Are you hurt?" he called. "No, you." "Nothing that will not heal. Can you climb back down?" The descent was even harder than the climb up, but eventually Cara made it back to the canyon floor. Her legs gave out when she reached solid ground, and she sat down hard, shaking with reaction. Beckett knelt beside her, his hands checking her for injuries despite her protests. "You should have run," he said, but there was no anger in his voice. "You could have been killed. So could you? I could not just leave you." His hands stilled, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You saved my life. That shot, that distraction, it gave me the chance I needed. You saved mine first. I suppose that makes us even." "I do not think that is how it works." He stood and offered her his hand, pulling her to her feet. "We need to go. There may be more coming." They made their way back out of the canyon, stepping carefully around the bodies of their attackers. Cara tried not to look too closely at them, at the consequences of violence she had helped commit. She had shot a man. She had helped kill. The knowledge sat heavy in her stomach. Beckett seemed to sense her thoughts. As they reached the horses, he turned to her. "You defended yourself and another. There is no shame in that. Those men made their choices, and those choices led them here. You bear no guilt for defending your life." "How do you know I feel guilty?" "Because you are a good person. Good people always feel the weight of taking life, even when necessary. It is the ones who feel nothing that you must worry about." They rode through the night, putting as much distance between themselves and the canyon as possible. Beckett seemed to have an instinct for navigation even in darkness, guiding them along paths Cara could barely see. As dawn broke, they stopped to rest the horses in a meadow filled with wildflowers. The beauty of it, the peaceful morning light painting the mountains in gold, stood in stark contrast to the violence of the previous day. Cara sat by a small stream, washing the blood and grime from her hands. Beckett joined her, doing the same. For a long while neither spoke, both processing what had happened. Finally, Cara broke the silence. "What do we do now? Those men worked for the mining company. When they do not return, more will come." "We have 2 choices," Beckett said slowly. "We can run, take what we know and leave Colorado entirely, start fresh somewhere else. Or we can fight, bring what we know to the territorial marshal in Denver, go over the heads of the local authorities who might be compromised. Running means they win. They kill my father and they face no consequences. Fighting means putting yourself in danger again. It means trusting the law to actually deliver justice, which is not always guaranteed. Cara met his eyes. What would you do? Alone, I would run. I have no love for civilization or its systems of justice. I would disappear into the mountains and never look back. He paused. But you deserve better than a life of running and hiding. You deserve justice for your father. So if you want to fight, I will stand with you. The simple loyalty in his words brought tears to Cara's eyes. This man, who had known her for barely a week, was willing to leave his solitary mountain existence to help her pursue justice. It was more than she had any right to ask. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for me? Beckett was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the flowing water. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because in the past week, you have reminded me that there are things worth coming down from the mountain for, worth fighting for, worth risking safety and solitude for. He turned to face her fully. You have brought light into a life I did not realize had become dark. Cara's heart hammered in her chest. Beckett, You do not have to say anything, he interrupted gently. I know I am not civilized, not educated in the ways of towns and proper courtship. I know I have nothing to offer but a cabin in the wilderness and a life that is hard and lonely by most standards. I do not expect anything from you. But I need you to know that I will help you for as long as you need help, and I will protect you for as long as you need protection, and I will ask nothing in return except the chance to do so. The words were the most she had ever heard him speak at once, and they struck her heart like an arrow. She reached out and took his large, scarred hand in both of hers. You are wrong, she said softly. You are not uncivilized. You are kind, honest, brave, and more honorable than any man I have ever met, and you are wrong about having nothing to offer. You have offered me safety when I had none, taught me skills to survive, and treated me with more respect and care than I have ever known. That is not nothing. That is everything. His eyes widened slightly, hope flickering across his weathered face. Cara, I do not want to run, she continued. But not only because of justice for my father. I do not want to run because running means leaving you behind when I have only just found you. You would stay. In the mountains. I would stay with you. The location matters far less than the company. For a moment, Beckett simply stared at her as if he could not quite believe what he was hearing. Then, with a gentleness that contradicted his massive frame, he cupped her face in his hands. May I kiss you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. In answer, Cara leaned forward and closed the distance between them. His lips were surprisingly soft, and he kissed her with a reverence that made her heart sing. It was nothing like the rough, demanding kisses described in the novels she had secretly read as a girl. This was gentle, questioning, a conversation without words. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Beckett rested his forehead against hers. I have never felt this way before. I did not know I could. Neither did I, Cara admitted, but I do not want it to stop. It will not. Not if I have any say in the matter. They sat there by the stream as the sun rose higher, holding each other, letting the reality of this new connection settle over them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. But first, they had to deal with the practical matters. After breaking their fast on dried meat and berries, Beckett gathered from nearby bushes. They discussed their plan. Denver is 3 days' ride from here, Beckett explained. We would need to travel carefully, stay off main roads where the mining company might have people watching. But I know paths through the mountains that will get us there safely. What about your home, your cabin? It has stood for 5 years. It will stand until we return. They set out that afternoon, beginning the long journey to Denver. The route Beckett chose wound through some of the most spectacular country Cara had ever seen. They followed ridge lines where the world seemed to drop away on both sides. crossed high alpine meadows carpeted in flowers, and passed through forests of aspen and pine, so dense the sunlight barely penetrated. Each night they would camp, and Beckett would build a small fire while Cara gathered whatever edible plants she could find, putting her new knowledge to use. They would eat together, then talk long into the night about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears and hopes. Cara learned that Beckett had two younger sisters who lived in Santa Fe with their husbands. He sent them money from his trapping and tried to visit every few years, though the journey was long and he disliked being away from the mountains for extended periods. "They worry about me," he admitted one night. "They think I am wasting my life hiding in the wilderness. They do not understand that I am not hiding. I am living the only way that makes sense to me." "Perhaps they will understand better now," Cara suggested. "Now that you have someone to share it with." He smiled, that rare expression that transformed his entire face. "Perhaps they will." On the second night, as they lay beside the fire wrapped in blankets, Beckett showed Cara something she had never experienced before. He led her to a small lake, its surface so still it looked like glass. The moon hung full and bright above them, painting everything in silver light. "Look," he said, gesturing to the water. Cara stepped to the edge and looked down. There, reflected perfectly in the mirror's smooth surface, was her own face. She gasped and stumbled backward. "What is wrong?" Beckett asked, concerned. I have seen myself in windows, in pots, but never clearly, never like that. You have never owned a mirror." She shook her head. "My father and we moved constantly for his work. We lived simply with only essential possessions. A mirror was never a priority." Beckett gently took her hand and led her back to the water's edge. "Then look now. See what I see." Cara looked down at her reflection, truly seeing herself for the first time. The face looking back was leaner than she remembered, browned by sun and wind. Her hair, which had always been her one vanity, fell in tangled waves around her face. Her eyes looked larger somehow, or perhaps older, marked by loss and hardship. "I look so different," she whispered. "You look beautiful," Beckett said simply. "You look strong. You look like someone who has survived and conquered. You look like you belong to these mountains now." Cara turned to look at him, tears blurring her vision. "Thank you for showing me this, for showing me who I have become. You were always this person. The mountains simply revealed what was already there." That night, lying beside him under the vast canopy of stars, Cara realized she had fallen completely in love with this man. It was not the slow, gradual affection she had always imagined love would be. It was sudden, overwhelming, absolute. He had saved her life, yes, but more than that, he had shown her a different way to exist in the world. He had given her strength, knowledge, and a vision of a future she had never imagined wanting. They reached Denver on the afternoon of the third day, and the city felt like an assault after days in the wilderness. The noise, the crowds, the press of humanity all around them made Cara anxious. She stayed close to Beckett, who looked equally uncomfortable in the urban environment. The territorial marshal's office was a modest building near the center of town. Marshal James Cooper was a weathered man in his 50s who listened intently as Cara explained everything. Her father's discovery, his murder, the pursuit through the mountains, the men who had died in the canyon. When she finished, she laid her father's papers on his desk. This is what they killed him for. This is what they were willing to do anything to possess. Marshal Cooper studied the papers, his expression growing darker. The Colorado Mining Consortium. I have had my suspicions about their operations for years, but never enough evidence to act on. These men who attacked you, you said some survived. One, possibly two, Beckett said. We left them wounded but alive in the canyon. Then we will send a party to collect them. With their testimony and these papers, we should have enough to bring formal charges against the company leadership." He looked at Cara with sympathy. "I am sorry about your father, miss. He sounds like he was a good man who stumbled onto something dangerous." "He was the best man I ever knew," Cara said softly. "Until recently." She did not look at Beckett when she said it, but she felt him shift slightly beside her, his hand finding hers under the desk. Marshal Cooper noticed the gesture and smiled slightly. "Where will you two be staying while this matter is resolved? It could take weeks to gather evidence and bring the case to trial." "We have not discussed it," Cara admitted. "There is a decent boarding house 2 streets over, run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. Clean rooms, fair prices. Tell her I sent you." They thanked the marshal and left, stepping back into the chaos of Denver's streets. Beckett looked profoundly uncomfortable, his hand resting on his knife as if expecting attack from any direction. "You hate it here," Cara observed. "Every moment. Too many people, too much noise, too much. Everything. Then we will not stay long, just long enough to see this through." They found Mrs. Patterson's boarding house and secured 2 rooms on the 2nd floor. The rooms were small but clean, with real beds and even a mirror on the wall, which made Cara laugh. "Now I have 2 mirrors," she told Beckett. "I am becoming quite spoiled." Over the next few weeks, they attended multiple meetings with Marshal Cooper and a territorial prosecutor who had been brought in from the capital. The case was building, but slowly. The mining company had powerful friends and expensive lawyers who fought every step of the process. During that time, Cara and Beckett explored Denver together, though neither enjoyed it much. They were both creatures of open spaces now, uncomfortable in the confines of civilization. They counted the days until they could return to the mountains. One evening, as they sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset paint the distant peaks in shades of gold and crimson, Beckett took her hand. "Cara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, always. When this is over, when justice is served and you are free to make your own choices, what do you want? Do you want to return to city life? Build something here near people and civilization?" Cara considered the question, though she already knew the answer. "I spent 18 years living in various towns and cities, moving from place to place with my father's work. I was never unhappy, but I was never truly content either. Everything felt temporary, superficial. These past weeks, living in your cabin, learning the ways of the wilderness, I have felt more at home than I ever have. So no, I do not want city life. I want the mountains. I want your cabin. I want you." Relief washed over Beckett's face so visibly it made her heart ache. "I was afraid you would come to your senses, realize what you would be giving up. I would be giving up nothing that matters and gaining everything that does." She squeezed his hand. "But I have a question for you too. Can you accept having someone share your solitary life? I do not want to be the person who ruins the peace you found in those mountains." "You do not ruin the peace. You complete it. I did not realize how lonely I was until you arrived and showed me what companionship could be. I do not want to go back to being alone." "Then we are decided. When this is over, we return to the cabin. Together." "Together," he agreed and sealed the promise with a kiss. The trial finally convened in early September. The courtroom was packed with spectators, drawn by the sensational nature of the case: murder, gold, corruption, and mountain justice. Cara testified about her father's death, about being hunted through the wilderness. Beckett testified about the attack in the canyon, his account delivered in his typical direct, unembellished style that somehow made it more powerful. The surviving gunmen, facing murder charges themselves, agreed to testify against the mining company executives who had hired them in exchange for reduced sentences. Their testimony was damning, detailing a pattern of violence, intimidation, and illegal claim jumping that had gone on for years. The trial lasted 3 days. In the end, the jury took less than 2 hours to return guilty verdicts against the 3 company executives charged in the conspiracy. They would spend the next 20 years in federal prison. When the verdicts were read, Cara felt a weight lift from her chest that she had carried since the night her father died. It was not happiness exactly. Her father was still dead, still gone forever. But it was closure, justice, the knowledge that his death had not been meaningless or forgotten. Outside the courthouse, Marshal Cooper approached them. "Miss Langford, there is the matter of your father's claim. The court has ruled that his discovery was legal and belongs to his estate, which means it belongs to you now." Cara shook her head. "I do not want it. I do not want anything to do with that gold." "Are you certain? We are talking about a fortune." "I am certain. Donate it to charity, use it to fund the marshal's office, I do not care. Blood money would buy me nothing I want." Marshal Cooper nodded slowly. "That is remarkably honorable of you, miss. I will make sure it is put to good use." They left Denver the next morning, both eager to return to the mountains. The city had served its purpose, but it had never felt like anything but a temporary stop. Home was waiting for them in the high peaks, in a small cabin with a view that stretched forever. The journey back took 4 days, as they were in no particular hurry. They took their time, stopping to fish in mountain streams, to gather late-season berries, to simply exist in the peaceful silence of the wilderness. When they finally crested the last ridge and Beckett's cabin came into view, Cara felt a surge of emotion so strong it surprised her. This was home. Not the place she was born, not any of the dozen towns she had lived in with her father, but this remote mountain sanctuary. The cabin was exactly as they had left it. Beckett opened the door, then surprised Cara by turning and lifting her into his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying you over the threshold. It is tradition, or so my mother once told me." "Tradition for what?" He set her down inside, his expression suddenly serious. "Cara Langford, I am not a man of fancy words or grand gestures. I can offer you a hard life in a remote place, with long winters and short summers, where the nearest neighbor is a day's ride away. But I can also offer you my complete and absolute devotion, my protection, my partnership in all things. I can offer you a life lived honestly, simply, in one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I can offer you my whole heart because you already have it whether you want it or not. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife?" Tears streamed down Cara's face, but she was smiling. "Yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to the hard winters and the remote mountains. Yes to partnership and devotion. And yes to your heart, which I will treasure for the rest of my life." Beckett kissed her then, deeply, passionately, conveying without words everything he felt. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "We will need to go back down to Breckenridge to find a preacher," he said practically. "Eventually," Cara agreed. "But for now, can we just be here? Just us in this place that brought us together? I can think of nothing I want more." They spent the next weeks settling into life together, learning the rhythms of shared existence. Beckett taught Cara more wilderness skills: how to cure meat, how to prepare hides, how to read the weather signs that warned of coming storms. Cara brought her own skills to the partnership. She could read and write, which Beckett could do only haltingly. She kept records of their supplies, read to him in the evenings from books she had brought from Denver. They discovered each other slowly, carefully, with a tenderness that surprised them both. Beckett had lived alone for so long he had forgotten the comfort of human touch. Cara had never known the touch of a man who saw her as an equal partner rather than a possession to be managed. They made love for the first time on a cool October evening, with the first snow of the season falling softly outside. It was awkward and fumbling and absolutely perfect, a physical expression of emotions too large for words. Afterward, lying in Beckett's arms surrounded by warm furs, watching firelight dance on the log walls, Cara felt complete in a way she never had before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Beckett replied, his deep voice rumbling in his chest. "I did not know I could feel this way. I did not know anyone could. We found each other against all odds. That has to mean something. It means we were meant for this, for each other." In November, they made the trip down to Breckenridge and found a circuit preacher who agreed to marry them. The ceremony was simple, witnessed by a few townspeople Beckett knew from his occasional visits to trade. Cara wore a simple dress purchased from the general store, and Beckett wore clean buckskins and a shirt his mother had made years ago. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Beckett kissed her with such joy that the small congregation erupted in applause and laughter. They spent their wedding night in a hotel in Breckenridge, a luxury they both found uncomfortable after months in the wilderness. The bed was too soft, the walls too close. They lay awake most of the night talking about their plans for the future. "I want to expand the cabin," Beckett said. "Add another room, maybe two, make it a real home for a family." "A family," Cara's heart raced at the implication, "if you want that." "Children, I mean. I know we have not discussed it." "I want that," she said softly. "I want everything with you." They returned to the mountains as snow began to fall in earnest, beginning the long winter lockdown when travel became nearly impossible. But they were prepared with plenty of supplies, and more importantly, they had each other. The winter proved harsh, as mountain winters always were. Snow piled higher than the cabin windows, and the temperature plunged so low that water froze in its bucket overnight despite the fire. But inside the cabin, wrapped in furs and each other's arms, Cara and Beckett were content. Beckett taught her to snowshoe, and on clear days they would venture out into the winter landscape, moving through a world transformed into something magical and strange. Everything was white and silent, the usual sounds of the forest muffled by the deep snow. As spring approached and the first hints of green began to show through the melting snow, Cara realized she had missed her monthly courses for 2 months running. Other signs confirmed what she suspected, and one evening after dinner, she took Beckett's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is going to be 3 of us come fall," she said simply. The expression on his face, pure wonder mixed with joy and a touch of fear, made her laugh and cry at the same time. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. "A child," he whispered. "We are going to have a child. Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover what I feel right now." He pulled back to look at her face. "Are you happy? I mean, happier than I thought possible, scared too, but mostly happy. I will take care of you both, I swear it. I know you will, I have never doubted that." True to his word from the fall, Beckett spent that spring and summer expanding the cabin. He felled trees, stripped logs, and fitted them with the same precision he brought to everything he did. By the time the leaves began to turn in September, the cabin had 2 new rooms, one for the baby and one for storage and work. Cara prepared as best she could for the birth. She had attended one birth back in her traveling days with her father, and she read everything she could find on the subject in the medical book Beckett had purchased on a supply run to Breckenridge. But she knew that when the time came, it would be just her, Beckett, and the mountain. The labor began on a clear October morning, exactly 1 year after they had first made love. Cara woke to cramping pain and knew immediately what it meant. Beckett, ever watchful, saw the change in her expression and understood. "It is time," he asked, trying and failing to keep the panic from his voice. "It is time," she confirmed. If the next hours were difficult for Cara, they were torture for Beckett. He was a man of action, someone who solved problems through strength and skill. But there was nothing he could do now except hold her hand, wipe her forehead, and try to remember everything they had read about assisting in childbirth. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in fire, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that echoed off the cabin walls. Beckett caught him with shaking hands, tears streaming down his weathered face as he cut the cord and wrapped the baby in soft furs. "A boy," he said wonderingly, placing the infant in Cara's arms. "We have a son." Cara looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "Hello, little one. Welcome to the world." They named him Daniel after Cara's father. He was a healthy baby, strong-lunged and hungry, and he transformed their lives completely. The cabin that had seemed spacious for two adults suddenly felt full with the addition of one small person. Beckett proved to be a devoted father, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he held his son. He would pace the cabin floor at night, the baby cradled against his chest, singing old songs his mother had taught him in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. As Daniel grew, he proved to be his father's son in temperament, quiet, watchful, content with his own company. By age 2, he could walk the mountain trails without tiring, his little legs somehow navigating terrain that would challenge most adults. When Daniel was 3, Cara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the labor was easier, and their daughter, Emma, arrived during a spring snowstorm that blanketed the world in fresh white. Emma was different from her brother in every way. Loud, demanding, constantly in motion. She kept them all running from the moment she could crawl, investigating everything, fearing nothing. Beckett called her his little wildcat, and the nickname suited her perfectly. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons. Harsh winters spent inside teaching the children to read and write and do figures. Springs of planting and exploring as the world came back to life. Summers of gathering and preserving food for the long months ahead. Autumns of hunting and wood cutting and preparation. They were not completely isolated. A few times a year, they would make the journey to Breckenridge for supplies and to let the children interact with other people. But those trips grew more infrequent as the children grew older and capable of entertaining each other. When Daniel was 7 and Emma was 4, a late-season snowstorm trapped a group of travelers at the base of their mountain. Beckett went down to help them, and returned with a young couple who had been trying to cross the mountains to reach a mining claim they had purchased. The couple, John and Sarah Miller, stayed with them for 3 days while the storm passed. Over those days, friendships formed. John had been a carpenter back east and was fascinated by Beckett's cabin construction. Sarah was a teacher who delighted in meeting the children and discovering they could already read and write. When the storm cleared and the Millers prepared to leave, John turned to Beckett with a proposition. "We have been thinking. Our claim is only about 10 miles from here, in the valley to the west. We were planning to build a cabin there. What if we built 2 cabins, close enough to be neighbors but far enough for privacy? Our children could play together, and the women would have companionship during the long winters." Beckett looked at Cara, who nodded slowly. The idea of having neighbors, people they could trust and rely on, had appeal. Not close neighbors, but mountain neighbors, people who understood and respected their way of life. "We can help you build," Beckett said. "And you would be welcome as neighbors if you are certain that is what you want. This life is not easy." "We are certain," John replied. "We have been searching for a place to belong. I think we just found it." Over that summer, Beckett helped the Millers build their cabin. In return, John taught Daniel basic carpentry skills that the boy absorbed eagerly. Sarah spent time with Cara, and the two women became close friends, bonded by their unusual choice to raise families in such remote locations. The Millers had a daughter, Grace, who was Daniel's age, and the three children, Daniel, Grace, and Emma, became inseparable during the summers when travel between the two cabins was easy. More years passed. Daniel grew tall and broad-shouldered like his father, with the same quiet competence and mountain skills. Emma remained wild and free, equally comfortable hunting with her father or helping her mother tend the garden they had established near the cabin. When Daniel was 16, he and Grace Miller began spending more time together, their childhood friendship transforming into something deeper. Beckett noticed and said nothing, simply watching his son with the same careful attention he brought to everything. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Daniel approached his father. "Papa, may I speak with you, always? I would like permission to court Grace properly, to ask John and Sarah if I may seek their daughter's hand when we are both older." Beckett studied his son, seeing the man he was becoming. "You love her." "I do. I know we are young, but I cannot imagine my life with anyone else." "Then you have my blessing, and I suspect your mother's as well. But Daniel, understand that love is work. Every day you choose it. Choose kindness when you want to be angry. Choose patience when you want to be frustrated. Choose honesty even when a lie would be easier. Can you do that?" "I can. You showed me how." Beckett gripped his son's shoulder, pride swelling in his chest. "Then speak to John. Tell him your intentions. Be honest and respectful. He will appreciate that." Daniel and Grace were married 2 years later, in a ceremony that brought together the two mountain families and a few trusted friends from Breckenridge. The young couple built their own cabin, halfway between Beckett's and the Millers, creating a small community in the mountains. Emma, meanwhile, showed no interest in marriage or courting, preferring to spend her time exploring ever farther ranges with her father, learning to track and hunt with skills that rivaled his own. "She is like you," Cara told Beckett one night as they watched Emma return from a solo hunting trip, a deer slung over her shoulders despite her small frame. "Wild and free and completely content in the mountains. She will find her path," Beckett replied, "just as we did." When Cara was 42 and Beckett was 52, they became grandparents. Daniel and Grace's son, another Daniel, arrived during a beautiful summer evening. Holding his grandson, Beckett marveled at the strange turns life had taken. 26 years ago, he had been a solitary mountain man, convinced he would live and die alone. Now he was surrounded by family, by love, by a life so rich and full it sometimes overwhelmed him. "What are you thinking?" Cara asked, moving to stand beside him. "That I am the luckiest man who ever lived, that you are the best thing that ever happened to me, that I thank God every day for the moment you crashed into my life. I was being hunted by killers and half-starved, not exactly the most romantic beginning, and yet it brought you to me. I would not change a single moment." Cara leaned her head against his massive shoulder. "Neither would I, not one moment." Emma eventually did marry, at age 23, to a young trapper named Samuel, who was one of the few men brave enough to keep up with her in the wilderness. They built a cabin even higher up the mountain than Beckett's, a place so remote it tested even his navigational skills to reach. As the years continued to pass, the small mountain community grew. More families, drawn by the freedom and beauty of the high peaks, settled in the area. A small school was established, and Emma, surprisingly, became the teacher, bringing her mother's love of learning to the next generation. Beckett and Cara grew older together, their hair turning silver, their bodies bearing the marks of a life lived hard. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper, richer. The kind of love that comes from truly knowing another person and choosing them every single day. On warm summer evenings, they would walk to the small lake where Beckett had first shown Cara her reflection all those years ago. They would sit by the shore, holding hands, watching the sun set over the mountains that had brought them together. "You ever regret it?" Beckett asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "Giving up city life, the possibility of comfort and ease," Cara laughed. "Are you seriously asking me that after all these years?" "I suppose I am." She turned to look at him, her eyes still bright despite her age. "Beckett Stone, you showed me who I really was when you brought me to this lake. You showed me that I was strong enough to survive anything, brave enough to build a life on my own terms. You gave me a home, a family, a love deeper than I ever imagined possible. The only thing I regret is that we did not have more years together, because even a lifetime will not be enough." He kissed her then, with the same tenderness he had shown the first time, all those years ago. "I love you, Cara Stone. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, my mountain man, forever and always." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one, painting the sky with silver light. Around them, the mountains stood eternal and unchanging, witnesses to a love story that had begun with violence and fear, but had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. In the cabins scattered across the mountainside, their children and grandchildren went about their evening routines. Fires were banked, children were tucked into bed, and couples held each other close against the mountain night. And Beckett and Cara, still holding hands by the lake that had shown her reflection so many years ago, were content. They had found what most people search their whole lives for: a place to belong, a person to love, a life lived true to themselves. As the moon rose over the peaks, painting everything in silver light, Cara squeezed Beckett's hand. "Show me again," she said softly. "Show you what?" "My reflection. Like you did that first time." They walked to the edge of the lake, and together they looked down into the mirror-smooth water. Two faces looked back now, his weathered and strong, hers softer but no less marked by time and sun. But their eyes held the same light, the same joy, the same absolute certainty that they had found exactly where they were meant to be. "You see what I see?" Beckett asked. "I see two people who found each other against impossible odds. I see a life well lived. I see love that has lasted through everything the mountain could throw at it. I see home," Beckett said simply. Years continued to pass in the peaceful rhythm they had established. Grandchildren became teenagers, then young adults with families of their own. The small mountain community flourished, bound together by mutual respect and the understanding that they had all chosen this difficult but rewarding life. When Beckett was 73 and Cara was 63, they celebrated their 44th wedding anniversary surrounded by 3 generations of family. Their cabin, expanded multiple times over the years, overflowed with children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Emma, now with silver threading her dark hair, stood to make a toast. "To my parents, who showed me that love is not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It is about showing up every day, choosing each other through good times and bad, building a life of meaning and purpose. You created not just a family but a legacy, and we are all better for it." "Hear, hear," echoed through the cabin, glasses raised in celebration. That night, after everyone had departed to their own homes, Beckett and Cara lay in their bed, wrapped in furs that had kept them warm for decades. "We did well, did we not?" Cara asked softly. "We did better than well. We built something that will outlast us, something good and true." "I am tired, my love, so very tired." "Then rest. I will watch over you as I always have. Promise me something, anything." "When I am gone, do not shut yourself away. Stay close to our family. Let them love you and care for you the way you have always done for them." "Cara." "Promise me, Beckett." "I promise, though I hope we have many more years together. We will have as many as we are given. And every one of them is a gift." They fell asleep holding each other, hearts beating in rhythm. Two lives so intertwined they had become one. Cara passed peacefully in her sleep 3 years later, her hand in Beckett's, surrounded by family. She was 66 years old and had lived a life more full than most people could imagine. Beckett grieved, as was natural and right. But he kept his promise. He remained close to his family, letting them support him through his loss. He played with great-grandchildren, told stories of the old days, and continued to live in the cabin he and Cara had made into a home. He died 5 years after Cara, at age 78, sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains he had loved his entire life. He went peacefully, a slight smile on his weathered face, and those who found him swore he looked like a man seeing someone he had missed desperately. They buried him beside Cara, on a small rise near the lake where he had first shown her reflection. The entire mountain community attended, along with people from Breckenridge and beyond who had known and respected the legendary mountain man and his wife. Daniel, now an old man himself, stood at his father's grave and spoke the eulogy. "My father was not a man of many words, but he taught us everything that mattered. He taught us strength tempered with gentleness, independence balanced with community, and love that lasted beyond death itself. He and my mother found each other in darkness and built a life of light. Their love story will be told in these mountains for generations to come, a reminder that true love does exist, and it is worth fighting for." Years turned to decades, and the story of Beckett and Cara became legend in the Colorado mountains. The cabin where they had lived, carefully maintained by their descendants, became a gathering place for the family that continued to grow and spread through the high peaks. And sometimes, on clear summer evenings, people swear they can see two figures walking hand in hand by the lake, a massive man with long, dark hair, and a woman who walks beside him with perfect confidence. They say if you watch long enough, you will see them stop at the water's edge and look down at their reflection. See them smile at what they find there. See them turn to each other with love that transcends time itself. Whether the sightings are real or simply the way mountains hold memories, no one can say for certain. But everyone agrees on one thing. Beckett and Cara Stone's love story was one for the ages, a testament to the power of two people finding each other against all odds and building something beautiful from their devotion. Their legacy lived on not just in their descendants, but in the very way of life they had established. Independent but connected, strong but compassionate, always choosing love over fear, courage over comfort, authenticity over appearances. The cabin still stands, though it is now more than 150 years old, maintained with care by each new generation. Inside, on a shelf of honor, sit two items: a set of worn surveyor's maps that started everything, and a simple wooden frame containing a drawing made by one of their grandchildren, showing two figures standing by a lake, their reflection clear in the still water. Beneath the drawing, in careful handwriting, are the words. She had never owned a mirror until the mountain man showed her reflection in the clear mountain lake water, but what she truly saw was love, and that, in the end, was the truth of their story. Not just a story of survival or adventure, not just a tale of the Wild West, but a love story for the ages. Two people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who chose each other every day for more than 40 years, who built a life and a family that continued to thrive long after they were gone. In the vast and often harsh landscape of the Colorado mountains, where survival required strength and determination, where the wilderness tested everyone who dared to call it home, Beckett and Cara had found something rare and precious, a love that was equal partnership, mutual respect, absolute devotion. They had shown everyone around them what was possible when two people truly committed to each other and to building a life of meaning. Their story was told around campfires and dinner tables, passed down through generations, inspiring others to believe that true love existed, that it was worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth building a life around. And in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the mountain peaks and the stars painted the sky with silver light, it seemed as though the mountains themselves remembered and celebrated the love story of Beckett Stone and Cara Langford, the mountain man and the woman he had saved who had ultimately saved him right back. Two souls who had found their home in each other and in the eternal beauty of the Colorado wilderness.